What if I told you? The greatest fantasy hero wasn't born to greatness? He wasn't strong. He didn't seek glory. He didn't even want to leave home. And yet, over 80 years later, The Hobbit is still read, still cherished, and still inspiring millions. In a world overflowing with modern fantasy epics, stories with sprawling worlds, morally gray heroes, and cinematic battles, you might think a small, simple book from 1937 would fade away. But it hasn't. Why? Why does a children's story about a quiet hobbit who just wants to stay home remain so influential, so beloved, so magical? Today we're going to explore every corner of this question. From Bilbo Baggins himself to the sprawling world of Middle-earth, from timeless themes to mythic storytelling, and understand exactly why The Hobbit has never lost its magic. The genius of The Hobbit starts with something deceptively simple, its tone. It begins with a single line that has captivated generations. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. It doesn't overwhelm you with politics, wars, or prophecies. It doesn't throw you into chaos or dark moral dilemmas. It welcomes you. This is a story you step into, not a story you're forced to follow. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote this story initially for his children, and you can feel it in every page. The humor in Bilbo's interactions with dwarves, the warmth of a hobbit home, the small comforts that make the journey feel personal. This isn't just storytelling, it's an invitation. Unlike many modern fantasies, which prioritize spectacle, The Hobbit prioritizes connection, slows down, lets you breathe. And ironically, in a world that's always moving faster, that slow, inviting pace is exactly what keeps people coming back. Bilbo Baggins is one of the most relatable heroes ever written. He isn't born brave. He isn't born clever. He isn't born adventurous. In fact, at the story's start, he actively avoids adventure. He loves comfort, routine, and predictability. He's just like us. And that's why his journey works. Adventure finds him, despite his resistance. First, Bilbo complains. He doubts himself. He feels inadequate. But gradually he grows. He outsmarts trolls using wit, not force. He navigates goblin caves with clever thinking. He confronts Gollum and wins not with strength, but with courage and intellect. Bilbo's growth is gradual, realistic, and deeply satisfying. By the end, he's not a perfect hero. He's still himself. But he's stronger, smarter, braver, and that makes him unforgettable. Because the truth is, we all grow like Bilbo. We all start in comfort. We all face fear. And we all have to step into the unknown. Tolkien didn't just write a story. He built a world. Middle-earth feels alive. It has history, language, and culture. The Shire feels like a place you could actually visit. Mountains, rivers, and forests feel real, not invented. Every race, from dwarves to elves, has its own customs, history, and language. Even in The Hobbit, which is a smaller, more personal story, the depth of this world shines through. Tolkien's attention to detail is astonishing. He created entire languages with grammar rules. He invented maps and histories stretching back thousands of years. Even food, songs, and poems are carefully crafted. And here's the magic. You don't need to know all of that to enjoy the story. Middle-earth is deep, yes, but it's accessible. You can step in as a first-time reader and feel like part of the world. And that's why it has endured. It isn't just a book. It's a gateway to something much larger. And that larger world eventually became The Lord of the Rings, which expanded Tolkien's vision into an epic saga. But The Hobbit remains the perfect introduction. Warm, inviting, and endlessly rereadable. Another reason The Hobbit remains timeless is its connection to myth. Tolkien was a scholar of ancient languages and Norse mythology. He didn't just invent fantasy creatures, he revived ancient archetypes. Smaug the dragon is both terrifying and intelligent, representing greed and destructive desire. Gollum embodies obsession, mystery, and the dangers of hidden darkness. Riddles and dark caves echo folklore traditions that span centuries. By blending myth with narrative, Tolkien created a story that feels both familiar and new. It resonates with readers on a primal level, even if they've never studied mythology. The combination of the fantastical and the human makes The Hobbit universal. And that universality is what allows it to cross generations. Kids read it for adventure. Adults read it for wisdom and reflection. Scholars study it for mythology and linguistic innovation. No other fantasy book manages that balance so well. At its heart, The Hobbit is about being human. It's a story about courage, not the flashy kind but the quiet, steady kind. It's about friendship, trust built between a hobbit and a company of dwarves. Loyalty in the face of danger. The power of collaboration even among unlikely companions. It's about greed and its consequences. Smaug hoards treasure, but his obsession leads to destruction. Characters are tested by their desire for gold, revealing moral truths. It's about growth. Bilbo leaves the Shire timid and inexperienced. By the end, he has faced his fears, outwitted foes, and proven his worth. But he hasn't lost himself. He's become more of who he already is. And that's what makes it timeless. The lessons aren't tied to a particular era. They're universal. They apply to any reader in any generation. Even today, The Hobbit continues to inspire new generations. It has been adapted into films by the Hobbit film series. It inspires video games, role-playing campaigns, and fan art worldwide. It's taught in schools, recommended in reading lists, and often the first fantasy book a young reader encounters. Why? Because it is approachable. It doesn't overwhelm. It invites curiosity. It encourages readers to explore bigger worlds, like The Lord of the Rings and beyond. It bridges the gap between childhood imagination and adult reflection. So why does The Hobbit remain popular today? Because it balances everything: simplicity and depth, adventure and comfort, fantasy and humanity. It reminds us that even the smallest person can make the biggest difference. It shows us that growth begins with fear, and courage is often quiet. It proves that a story can be simple, yet profound, and it leaves us wanting more. Not because it's incomplete, but because it's alive in our imaginations. That's why, over 80 years later, readers still open its pages, still smile at Bilbo's courage, still marvel at Middle-earth, and still feel that sense of magic. What about you? What's your favorite moment in The Hobbit? Or if you haven't read it yet, what intrigues you most? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you love deep dives into legendary books, make sure to subscribe for more content. Because the next story we explore may surprise you. And who knows, it might become your favorite too.